Hello everyone, welcome to session 5 of IS Baba's Rapid Revision series or RARE series for UPSC Prelims Examination 2021. I am Preetham Reddy and in this session I will be dealing with 10 high probable topics from science and technology and environment related current affairs. So these 10 topics are important for UPSC Prelims Examination 2021. So these are the topics. First is synthetic aperture radar. So in previous session we saw NISAR, right? So NASA and ISRO synthetic aperture radar satellite mission. So we'll try to understand the working of this SAR, that is synthetic aperture radar, and also we'll try to understand the working of hyperspectral imaging satellite, and we'll try to understand what is this concept modern grand solar minimum, and we will revise about Sunspot and ISRO's Shukrayaan mission and LIGO India, and 4 important topics from environment. So here first we will try to understand what is this Gaia hypothesis, and then Ladakh's Sokar wetland complex, and 42 Ramsar wetland sites in India, and finally the recently launched National Marine Turtle Action Plan, and we will also try to know about marine turtles. So these are the important topics for this session. So first we will try to understand, simple questions can be framed, that what is the working of a radar or synthetic aperture radar. So we know that most of the Earth observation satellites, they use radars. So recently NISAR, it is using synthetic aperture radar. So why Earth observation satellites they use radars? Because these radars gives what? All weather vision. Okay, and this particular usage of radars in satellites, it is followed since 1978. But you have to know, India entered this particular field in 2009. So it was in 2009 that India entered this particular field with RISAT 2. So it had RISAT 2. This RISAT 2, it was using an Israeli payload. Okay, but after 10 years, that is in 2019. So right now ISRO has around 4 synthetic aperture radar satellites. So you have to remember, we have around 4 SARs in the space. So we shall try to understand what is this synthetic aperture radar. So as simple, any radar, it is nothing but an active sensor that first transmits some signals and then receive back the signal, right? So in the same fashion, this SAR is nothing but a active sensor that transmits microwave signals. So you have to remember this particular SAR, it transmits microwave signals and then it receives back the signal from, or which are backscattered from the Earth's surface. So this is the operation. So this synthetic aperture radar, it is a way of creating an image using radio waves, which we have to remember, and the radio waves which are used in SAR, so it is typically 2 or 3 centimeters in wavelength, and which is usually longer than the wavelength of visible light, which is used in making some optical images. So this third point is very important, that the radio waves which is used in SAR, that is microwave signals, the wavelength is much longer than those of visible light. So you can see in this figure, so visible light, and you can see the microwave. So the wavelength of SAR, it is much longer than the visible light. So in simple, you have to remember, SAR bounces a microwave radar signal, and SAR satellites, they are placed in low Earth orbits. So you have to remember, so these SAR satellites, they are placed usually in low Earth orbits, and it is capable of producing extremely high resolution images. So next we'll try to understand the uses or application of SAR satellites. So these SAR satellites, they can easily map farms. So and they are used in maritime surveillance, and they can easily assess soil moisture, they can predict harvest, gauge terrain features, infrastructure, appraise water bodies, they can be used in studying Antarctic icebergs, so tracking the path of oil spaces and mapping wetlands. So this SAR data, it can be handy, and SAR satellites, they can detect the movement of people on land and even on ships. Okay, so it is very much ideal for border and maritime surveillance, and this SAR data, it comes handy for authorities when it comes to deciding crop insurance or compensation, or assessing the damage in flooded areas or other calamities. So SAR, it is a very important. So SAR has a good amount of usages and applications. So there might be a question on the application of SAR as well. Okay. So next important topic is hyperspectral imaging satellites. So this particular satellite, it is similar to the SAR satellite. The only difference is here it doesn't use microwave signal, rather it is using visible and infrared signals. Okay, so we'll see. So even this hyperspectral imaging satellite, it's a Earth observation satellite. So it's a Earth observation satellite, and usually they are orbiting around 636 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And this particular hyperspectral imaging satellite, it observes Earth surface in 3 different ranges, that is visible, near infrared and shortwave infrared. As I said, in SAR it is using microwave, right? But this hyperspectral imaging system, so it is using usually visible and infrared. Okay, so visible, near infrared and shortwave infrared. So in short, this HISIS, that is hyperspectral imaging satellite, it enables us to do a CAT scan equivalent of Earth from space. And even with this HISIS, we have to know its application. So even HISIS can be used to map lands or monitor agriculture, forestry, and we can also map the minerals, and it is also used in military surveillance because it provides the what color images of the Earth. Okay, so hyperspectral imaging combines digital imaging and spectroscopy, and it uses critical chip called as optical imaging detector array. Okay, again both these satellites, the main purpose is Earth observation satellite, and usually this SAR satellites, they are in low Earth orbits, whereas this HISIS satellites, they are launched in sun synchronous polar orbit. So why is this? Because as I said here, this is SAR is a all weather satellite. So any weather we can observe the satellite, but when it comes to other satellites, like usually they require sun, right? Only when sunlight is there we can take the images or pictures. That's the reason this is the main difference. So next we will try to understand the difference between optical imaging based Earth observatory satellite and synthetic aperture radar Earth observatory satellite. So we have one optical imaging, the second one is radar based EO satellites. So first we already saw the radio waves which are used in SAR, that is synthetic aperture radar, they are longer than the wavelength of visible light which is used in making optical images. So even in HISIS we are using optical like visible wavelength and infrared. So usually in radar the wavelength is much more higher. So next important point is optical imaging based Earth observatory satellites, they capture color images. So only when there is sunlight and no cloud or rain is there, then they will be effective. Whereas this SAR, that is synthetic aperture radar, it works 24/7 and any weather, so all weather conditions, and it do not require sunlight. However, this SAR satellites, they require large recharge time between each data capture. So this is the limitation, but SAR is very much useful and its application is high and effective compared to optical imaging based Earth observatory satellites. So these are the things which you have to remember. So let's move on to next topic, modern grand solar minimum. So first we will try to understand what is this solar minimum. So solar minimum is the period where it is like least solar activity is observed. So solar minimum is the period of least solar activity, and it happens especially in the 11-year solar cycle of the sun. So during this time, sunspot and solar flare activity, it reduces or diminishes. So this is what you have to remember regarding solar minimum. So solar minimum is a period where usually sunspot and solar flare activities, they reduce. That is, it is where the solar activity reduces. So if you remember that concept, that is sufficient. So why this modern grand solar minimum is in news? Because according to recent findings and studies, scientists believe that the sun was at its weakest during 2019, and this event was observed in the last 100 years or so. So this is called as solar minimum. And scientists also believe that 2020, it marked the beginning of the 25th cycle. So according to the recent findings, so 2020 marked the beginning of the 25th cycle, and Sun may be going through modern grand solar minimum. That is, right now Sun may be going through a long period of decreased solar activity, and we call it as a modern grand solar minimum. And this event is going to happen between 2020 to 2053. So we should know what are the impacts because of this solar minimum, which is happening right now from 2020 to 2053. And as you can see in the figure, so the last time such an event occurred was during the Maunder minimum. So you can see here Maunder minimum. So it was during 1650s, right, or 1645 AD till around 1700 or 1710 or 50 AD. Okay, so it happened during 1650 to 1750 AD, and which was part of what we call it as a mini ice age or little ice age. Okay, so the earth went through a series of cold periods during that medieval centuries. So that kind of so similar type of solar minimum is going to happen right now. So maybe from 2019 till 2050, earth will be experiencing this modern grand solar minimum, and maybe after 2050 we can experience this mini ice age kind of condition. So this is what scientists have revealed in their studies and findings. Okay, so you should know the concept of this solar minimum, and also you should know sunspots. So we'll try to understand what are sunspots, because as I told you here, when we say solar minimum, it is the period of least solar activity. So where sunspot and solar flare, so these activities are reduced or diminished. Okay, so we should understand what is sunspot, and we should know what happens or what kind of impact we will be facing when there is solar minimum. Okay, so first we'll try to understand sunspot. They are nothing but areas of strong magnetic forces on the surface of the sun, that is photosphere. So these sunspot, as you can see in the figure, they are darker, right? So they are darker and they are cooler areas on the surface of the sun, which is called photosphere. And these sunspots are areas of strong magnetic forces. So sunspots are relatively cool because they form at areas where magnetic fields are particularly strong, and these magnetic fields, they are so strong that they keep some of the heat within the sun from reaching the surface. So they are caused by interaction with the sun's magnetic field, which you have to remember. And right now this sun's magnetic field, it is not fully understood. Okay, so sunspots are relatively cool because they form at the areas where magnetic fields are particularly strong. And when energy from sunspots are released, so you have to remember this point, solar flares and big storms called coronal mass ejections, they erupt from the sunspot. So it is important to note, when energy from the sunspots are released, certain solar flares and big storms called coronal mass ejections, they erupt from the sunspot. And one important point what you have to note, as I discussed earlier, the number of sunspots is directly proportional to solar activity. So more sunspot means more solar activity. So what is happening in solar minimum? So we are telling that it is the period where there is less solar activity, means there is less sunspots, and there is less solar flares. So this is the concept which you have to remember, and you have to revise what can be the impacts. So what can be the impact? So obviously, as we saw in the figure, so during solar minimum, so the surface temperature on earth, it may go down during this kind of activity. So there might be around 70% reduction in solar magnetic activity. So any kind of variations in the solar irradiance or any kind of variations or decrease in the solar activity, it can also affect the climatic cycles of the earth. Okay, so this is what we have to remember. So next important topic is Shukrayaan. So why this Shukrayaan is in news? Because India is set to launch Shukrayaan, that is Venus mission, in 2024. So Shukrayaan is nothing but ISRO's new orbiter mission to Venus. So this Shukrayaan orbiter is nothing but, it is the India's first mission to the Venus by ISRO, and it will study the planet for almost 4 years. So these three things you have to remember. And what are the other key points which we have to remember? What are the objectives of ISRO's Venus mission? So first we'll try to investigate the surface processes and shallow subsurface stratigraphy on the Venus, and we'll try to investigate solar wind interaction with Venusian ionosphere. So why this study? Because Venus often it is described as the twin sister of the Earth. Okay, so you might have read in geography, it is often called as twin sister or evil sister of the Earth, because there are many similarities in size, mass, density, and also bulk composition and gravity. So it is believed that both the planets, they share a common origin, and they might have formed at the same time. And one more important point what we have to know is Venus, it is around 30% closer to the Sun as compared to Earth, so resulting in much higher solar flux. So people started, or world countries started exploring Venus way back in early 1960s. So Venus has been explored by flyby orbiter, a few lander missions and atmospheric probes by different countries. So right now ISRO will be starting its first mission to Venus, which is called Shukrayan. And also you have to remember Venus is one of the two planets that rotate from east to west, that is, that rotates in an opposite direction. So only Venus and Uranus, they have this backward rotation, you have to remember. So let's move on to next topic, that is LIGO India. So LIGO, so you might have read many times regarding LIGO. So LIGO is nothing but a large scale physics experiment observatory which was established in 2002. So it is nothing but a large scale physics experiment observatory in order to detect gravitational waves. So we have INDIGO, that is Indian Initiative in Gravitational Wave Observations. So this INDIGO, it is a consortium of Indian gravitational wave physicists in order to set up advanced experimental gravitational wave observatory facilities. So why this topic LIGO India is important? Because currently whatever the present telescopes are there, they are able to detect objects because only those objects which are emitting electromagnetic radiation such as X-ray, gamma rays, etc. However, there are many events which is happening in the space. Say for example, merger of black holes. So such events, they do not emit electromagnetic waves, rather they emit gravitational waves. That's the reason we are trying to form a consortium of physicists, and we are doing certain experiments in order to set up advanced experimental gravitational wave observatory. So we want to observe, or we want to detect gravitational waves in the space or in the universe, whatever is happening. So this LIGO was established to unfold the many unknown phenomena. So with LIGO we will be able to detect those gravitational waves. So we'll come to know how black holes are merging, or any other mystic events which is happening in the mysterious events which is happening in the universe. That's the reason this INDIGO is important. It is piloted by both Department of Atomic Energy as well as Department of Science and Technology. And this INDIGO observatory, it is located in Maharashtra, and LIGO India is planned as a collaborative project between a consortium of Indian research institutions and LIGO laboratory in the USA. And other partners include Australia, Germany and the UK. And while revising, you have to know LIGO, it uses gravitational wave observations during the astronomical studies. That's why this LIGO is important, this concept is important. So next topic, let's move on to Gaia hypothesis. So why this Gaia hypothesis is important? Because it is over 50 years. Okay, so 50 years ago, this scientist called James Lovelock. Okay, so the scientist called James Lovelock, he hit upon the idea that Earth is a complex, self-regulating organism. So he called his idea, so he named his hypothesis as Gaia hypothesis after the Greek goddess who symbolizes Earth. So it is Greek goddess name Gaia which is used for this hypothesis. So we'll see what is this hypothesis. So simply put, this Gaia hypothesis, it says that Earth is a living system and uses similar mechanism that living creatures use to stay alive by constantly regulating temperature, chemical and physical inputs, and adoption through evolution, right? So this Gaia hypothesis, it says that the biosphere and physical components of the Earth such as atmosphere, cryosphere, we have lithosphere, we have hydrosphere. So all these physical components of the earth and the biosphere, they are closely integrated in order to form a complex interacting system that maintains the climatic and biogeochemical conditions on earth in a preferred homeostasis. So in simple words, we can understand about this Gaia hypothesis, which is put forth by James Lovelock, that it is nothing but a ecological theory which proposes that both living creatures and the physical world, they are in a complex interacting system, and that maintains homeostasis or equilibrium, right? So this is what you have to know. So hypothesis is frequently described as viewing the earth as one great living organism, and James Lovelock hypothesis could unlock a whole system approach to protecting the amazing life forms. So this Gaia hypothesis, it is named after mythical Greek goddess Gaia, who personifies the earth. So this is what you have to remember. So next topic, Ladakh's Sokar wetland complex. So why it was in news? Because it is now a wetland of international importance. So India has added this Sokar wetland complex, which is in Ladakh, as its 42nd Ramsar site. So we have 42 Ramsar sites as of 4th June. So next we have to note that this Sokar basin, which is a high altitude wetland complex, it consists of both freshwater lake, that is Startsapuk So, and hypersaline Sokar. Okay, so as you can see in the figure, so there is this Sokar. So this is the second wetland or Ramsar wetland from Ladakh. So which one is the first one? It is Somurari. So Somurari is the first. Now second wetland from Ladakh, which is now in the list of wetland of international importance. It is Sokar wetland complex. So you have to remember what is the meaning of Sokar. It means white lake. So this Sokar is also called as white lake because of the white salt which is found on the margins due to the evaporation of highly saline water. And this Sokar wetland complex, it is part of A1 category important bird area. So important bird area, we know that it is given by BirdLife International, right? So this, and it is a key site in Central Asian flyway. Also we have to note that there are some important species which are found here. So try to remember one important species, that is black-necked crane. So this Sokar wetland complex, it is main breeding site for black-necked crane, which is very important species. So next topic, so I have listed and updated all the important 42 Ramsar wetland sites. Okay, so there are 42 Ramsar wetland sites as of 4 June 2021. So you can go through all these things, and from this we will get to know that Sundarban, so Sundarban wetland, it is the largest wetland in India. Okay, so try to know whichever wetlands were added recently in 2020 and 2019 at least. Okay, so try to know 2019 and 2020 which wetlands were added, and try to know which particular species are found there. Okay, even in previous rapid revision series, that is last year's rapid revision series, I have dealt with all the new wetlands which have been added, so you can go through those things. Maybe questions can come this year as well. Okay, so next important topic, so do revise some of the important wetland sites which were added only in 2019 and 20, and whichever might be added in 2021. So next, National Marine Turtle Action Plan. So this was recently launched in this year. So it was launched by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So it released marine megafauna stranding guidelines, as well as it launched National Marine Turtle Action Plan. So we know that India, besides being home to one of the largest congregations of nesting of olive ridley turtles, we have around 5 important marine turtles. So these species, all these marine species, they are found in whichever are found in Indian waters, we have been listed those under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act. Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So all these marine species, so India is trying to protect, and we have accorded very high protection status. So this National Marine Turtle Action Plan, it focuses on reducing threats, conserving critical habitat, exchanging scientific data, and increasing public awareness regarding the conservation and protection of these marine turtles. So we have around 7 species of marine turtle in the world: hawksbill, leatherback, Kemp's ridley, green turtle, loggerhead, olive ridley, and flatback. And in India, 5 species of marine turtles are found. One is olive ridley, green, hawksbill, and loggerhead, and leatherback. I have given a small figure, and you should know that the Constitution also recognize the need to protect wildlife, right? Both under Article 48A, that mandates state to protect and safeguard and improve the environment, and also it is our duty, right, as a fundamental duty. Article 51A subclause G, even citizens, we have to protect and improve the natural environment. So do remember those things. So we have this marine turtles, they are protected right now under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, and we have this olive ridley turtle, which is vulnerable, green marine turtle, which is endangered, hawksbill turtle, which is also vulnerable, loggerhead, and leatherback. So leatherback is vulnerable, and I think loggerhead is also vulnerable, but only hawksbill is critically endangered. Okay, so you have to remember mainly hawksbill, which is critically endangered, and rest of the things are vulnerable, and green is endangered. So these are the topics for today's session. Okay, and I have listed some important marine turtles habitats, and it has been like listed, and I have provided those lists in rare notes. So do download rare notes and do revise from that one. Thank you. So we will be meeting in the next session, that is Monday.